Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Derek and Joe. For Joe Azzalina, I am Derek and O. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Today, we welcome back Phil Engel. Phil, it's been so long since we've seen you. We appreciate you coming on once again to
Yeah.
talk about our topic.
No, I mean, yeah, thanks, guys. I think this is my fourth or fifth time on the show. I mean, to be on twice in a month is pretty cool. So thanks for having me on. So appreciate it.
Always.
As Joe knows, we have started up a debate style shows. If you missed our first debate style show, it was whether or not Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. If you missed that one, feel free to jump back. It was a very good episode, and watch that one. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe and click the subscribe button. It very much helps Joe and I out with our channel in our hopes of building the channel. Today, we're just diving right into the difficult topics around the world of sports. Although it was kind of talked about, Joe, a little bit. I remember I had to reel you in a little bit because they kind of are back to back a little bit in terms of how they should be dealt with. But today is PEDs, and ultimately, should the steroid era players be in the Hall of Fame? What should be done about the steroid eras or the steroid era players in the Hall of Fame? It's been a looming issue for years now with the MLB. Uh, let's start off with you, Phil. Just give us your generic feelings on players who use PEDs and their Hall of Fame possibilities. Whether you're not, we'll get into whether or not they belong, but just your generic feelings on it.
Well, for me, I think the steroid era is when I first was introduced to baseball. So I thought it was entertaining. I thought all those games were entertaining. I just, the players were entertaining. It was just like everyone loved home runs. They just loved the big bodies, just hitting home runs, just bashing. And it kind of brought the sport back, to be honest. After the strike in '94, baseball was kind of dying. Everyone was losing interest and stuff. And then, everyone starts hitting home runs. Sosa, McGuire, they kind of revitalized the sport and that home run chase since this, summer of, I think, '98. Yeah, so I think my overall shirt, I mean, I'm wearing the shirt. It's A-Rod related, it's to forgive him, for what he did and whatnot. And, I think my overall thoughts is, they should be in the Hall of Fame, maybe with like a distinction or whatever. But, you can't tell the story of baseball without including them. You can't leave them out entirely. You have to have them in. But yeah, I just think there's too much, every time the Hall of Fame talk comes around every year, in January, February, when the votes are coming in, everyone has like these like long-winded arguments about why they shouldn't be in and stuff. But I mean, everyone was taking something at that time. So they should. I just think, you can't, like I said, you can't tell the story of baseball without including them. So they should, they should be in the Hall of Fame. That's my overall, my first, my initial take.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I will say that I was definitely captivated watching McGuire and Sosa go after the home run chase. I'm not going to elaborate just because Phil talked about it. But when McGuire was caught with the Anderstein, I lost a lot of respect for him. I really did. He's the guy that hit home runs early in his career. Him and Barry Bonds mirrored each other in that they had great careers before they even took anything. I will say, because I know I have to say this because our guest and Derek's cousin, John Bisco, said it last episode, was that Bonds was never caught. Now, the thing about that is, if you look at Barry Bonds in Pittsburgh and his size, and you look at Barry Bonds in San Francisco, and you just look at the size of his head, that was what everybody was saying.
He just wanted to work out a lot. That's all. He was just in the gym a lot.
And again, it's arguable. That's what, it's arguable. But
well, Joe, what are your feelings on the guys who were found guilty or admitted to it, like the Mark McGwires, versus the guys who have been accused, like a Barry Bonds or I believe a Roger Clemens, right? I don't think that was ever technically confirmed that he did it either. So do you have any separate feelings on those types of guys, or is it all?
I just think whether you're accused or you literally, like we said, found the interesting, and Vince kept coming out and saying these guys are doing stuff, whether it's pitchers or hitters. I think, to me, they all go in one category. I just think that, and your cousin said it, a cheater's a cheater. There's gray areas there in a ways. I know that's what makes this hard, but you have a guy like, and I don't want to go back to our last show, but I just want to throw this out there. You have a guy like Pete Rose who gambled on baseball, right? And he's not even on a ballot. But then you have these guys that are on these ballots. So my take is they all do not belong in the Hall of Fame. I know what Phil said about the story of baseball, but now the story of baseball should be the guys that did it more or less the right way or clean. I know there could be other guys that maybe weren't caught, but a lot of these guys were caught. And to me, that's the black eye in this whole thing, guys.
See, so but I think, I'll just say quick. I truly think, and I hope I'm staying consistent with this. I've done more research over the past few months that has informed my decision a little bit. I truly think if they were caught and they are guilty or admitted to it, you cannot put them in. You cannot let the people who cheat and admit cheating get in. Whereas I am different on Barry Bonds, and I think the only ones on my list here are Bonds and Clemens. Everyone else tested positive or admitted to it. Those two, I say put them in, because while we believe they definitely did do something, it was never proven, and we are in a system, right, of innocent until proven guilty.
So here's the thing with me is, like, you can't put Bud Selig in when he oversaw this whole
That's thing. Another topic. Yeah,
he oversaw this whole era, and he's been celebrated now, but he turned a blind eye to this, kind of, because he saw the revenue coming in, he saw how baseball was coming back and stuff, and
right.
And also, like, Selig was pretty shady commissioner. He gave teams to his friends. He did all this stuff. But I will say, with COVID last year, I started reading again. And one of the books I read was Game of Shadows, which goes back into the, steroids of Bonds, Clemens, like kind of the behind the scenes stuff of, forget what was it, Balco, yeah. Like that guy. So it was a one-sided book, it kind of was like that, but it did shed a lot, like that all these guys were doing something, they were getting steroids, they didn't test positive or anything. They were taking stuff that was maybe not considered illegal or, against the, rules of the game, instead of that. So, but yeah, I think I agree with, like, you guys saying, like, if they got caught cheating or maybe admitted it, then yeah, it's tougher to make the case that they should be in. But then again, another point I have is there's been some type of cheating in every era of baseball. It might not be steroids, but it's back in the 60s when Hank Aaron were playing, a lot of people were using, like, they're called greenies. They're basically like heavy caffeine pills. It's like just to give you a boost, like boosts and stuff like that. So every year, every time there's something going on where players are using something they shouldn't be using. So it's just like but everyone only makes this big stink about steroids. So it's just interesting.
Well, I think too, though, if you look at some of these guys that played when we were growing up, Alex Rodriguez, Bonds, like you look at these guys, Palmeiro, they all hit quite a few home runs. And I'm not saying it's all about home runs, but that's the sexy baseball. So when you said about Bud Selig turning the blind eye, I don't disagree with that. I think they wanted this stuff to happen. But isn't it a shame now that here we are in 2021 in an age where Alex Rodriguez should be in the Hall of Fame? You know, Barry Bonds should be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's also like another issue, like with these baseball writers thinking they're like have a little too much power.
I agree with
that. I mean, that can be a whole nother topic, but I think that comes down to it too, where these baseball writers just think they have so much power, and at the end of the day, it's just a museum. I mean, they should be. Yeah, I mean, these guys were at the top of the game when they played it. You know, it's the rules of the unwritten rules of the game was like, if everyone's taking it, I might as well just take it too. So yeah.
And unfortunately, as you said, Phil, we don't know who truly was clean, who truly was dirty. So that ultimately comes into play in some people's minds, but in opposite directions. Some people think, well, I'm not going to let anyone in for that era. Or some people just say, well, then you might as well let everyone in from that era.
And, well, here's the thing. There's also steroid guys already in the Hall of Fame. So, like, I think the most notable one that always sticks out to me is Pudge Rodriguez. Like, it came out that he took stuff, but he got it, and he's in there. So, like, and who knows who else took stuff that's already in there. So, like, you don't, like how you're saying, we don't know truly know who took it, who don't. We also don't truly know who's already in the Hall of Fame, who took it or not. So, you can't differentiate, you can't, then you get into a slippery slope and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, Joe, we'll start with you and then kick it to Phil when you're done. As you mentioned earlier, players who were locks before they got caught, and you mentioned Barry Bonds. Does that mean anything different to you? The guys who ultimately, I'm trying to see if there are any. I mean, Alex Rodriguez was what in 2014. Was he one before that? Probably.
He was his whole career basically. Yeah.
Yeah, but wasn't caught until 2014. So, but what are your thoughts on those guys who probably were locks for Hall of Fame before they got caught? Does it matter? Because who knows if they were doing it earlier? But does that matter in your opinion, or?
I mean, like I said about Bonds, he was having the guy was making all-star games left and right in Pittsburgh. He was the superstar in that era of that team. It was a shame to see him go to San Francisco. Listen, when Jeff Kent came out and said Barry Bonds is taking something, like that to me, even though he wasn't caught, you got teammates ratting you out. That's just showing you usually how probably disliked he was on his own team. I know Jeff Kent was a little bit of a
Jeff Kent's kind of pop calling kettle black there.
Yeah, I was using that just because I knew he was one guy that did that. I wasn't. It's true. I'm glad you said that. It's true.
Yeah.
But no, I just have a hard time with, and I said this before. If there's any argument for Pete Rose in this whole thing, if you're gonna put guys like Bonds or Clemens or any of these guys in, A-Rod in, if one of those guys gets in, I feel like Pete Rose has a shot, hopefully, to get on the ballot, as we talked about, and then to get in. I know it's another different topic, but I just want to throw it out there. I will say this. Alex Rodriguez played in 3 different teams, if I'm not mistaken. He played in Texas. He started his career in Seattle, played in Texas, and played in New York, right? Am I right about that?
Yep, just 3.
Okay. Seattle, I don't think he didn't show that he was doing anything in Seattle, right? Playing with Griffey, like you just think that he probably did everything the right way. When he got to Texas, he got his contract and the whole thing about the airplane and all that stuff. He could have started there. He could have started in the and we're speculating, but I'm just for argument's sake. He gets to New York and he has to be the man because Derek Jeter's already the man and the guy doesn't do anything wrong. So plus he's a heck of a baseball player in it all. So I think that A-Rod felt pressure. A lot of these guys feel pressure. And like Phil said, it's kind of the nature of the beast. You want to outwork everybody. You want to outplay everybody. And I'm sorry, in no uncertain terms, being with kids all the time at work, I can't sit there and say that I can ever condone cheating because I can't. But it feels right in saying that a lot of these guys did it. Then again, where do you draw the line? And I still say that the whole quote, a cheater's a cheater. But, I don't even know if I answered the question, Derek. I just kind of went off on a little tangent there. But Phil, talk about a couple guys. You saw A-Rod probably up close and personal in New York. Where do you think his timeline was? Do you think he did feel that pressure?
I mean, A-Rod's probably like the most insecure player that's ever played. So he definitely felt the need, especially in New York and especially in Texas. I think, the pressure always got to him. I think he knew what he was doing. But yeah, some other guys too. It's just like, I got a couple of guys like, I don't know. I think they all knew what they were doing. You got McGuire and Sosa that were just basic home run hitters. They only had one function. Even like guys like, I don't know, Luis Gonzalez, he was linked to steroids as well. No,
was he?
Yeah, he's not on my list. I don't think he was technically ever proven, but
yeah, I mean, I guess I could go for a lot of guys, but I think
maybe accused.
Yeah, same with like Palmeiro too.
Yeah,
you have that on your.
He was.
There's guys too, so
yeah.
But yeah.
So let me run through some of the notorious PED users here and what they have done in the Hall of Fame voting. We'll start with Jason Giambi. He admitted to using PEDs in 2003. He had a 1.5% in 2020. He is off the ballot. Jose Canseco admitted in 2003, 1.1% in 2007, off the ballot. Sammy Sosa, he tested positive in 2003. He had a high of 17%. Actually, this past year in 2021, it will be his 10th year in 2022. Again, needs to get 75%. Mark McGuire finished 2016 with 12.3%. His high was 23.7. He admitted in 2010. His highest was 2010, 23%. Andy Pettit admitted in 2008, 13.7 this past year. It'll be his 4th year in 2022. Rafael Palmeiro, he was as high as 12.6% in 2012, went as low as 4.4 in 2014, knocked off the ballot. He was positive in 2005. Go ahead, Phil. I won't read out all these guys, but there's a bunch of them that the Hall of Fame said, forget it. You were proven, you're out.
The thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which has always been my argument, is baseball is one of the hardest sports to play, especially hit it. Like steroids don't make you have like a batter's eye. It just makes you have big muscles and makes you like stuff like that. So that's why like whenever anyone brings up Barry Bonds, I'm like, well, he still had probably the greatest eye at the plate in ever. Like he walked more. He walked more than anyone. He did all that stuff. Like you still have to hit a baseball. So like just because you're taking something that obviously makes you something better than the rest of the competition, you still have to perform. And these guys perform. Like so that's what I always come back to.
Do you think it needs to be should it be a case by case basis? You can't just generically say everyone who used PEDs is out. Everyone who used PEDs is in. Do then it gets trickier because
So I
everyone's
think
case by case basis is different.
I think you get into a slippery slope with the case by case thing. I think if you're linked to it or if you're just in, I think you just should be in, but like like a little designation, like just being like, just maybe a steroid designation or something like that for the caught guys. I mean, you obviously can't do that for the rumored guys. Even though there's a lot of evidence against Bonds and Clemens, even though they haven't, and among so many other guys, but I think they should, they maybe just have their own wing or something. I mean, they should still be in. So.
Joe, does it matter if if we want to bring up someone like Robinson Cano, who's been caught twice now? The third
He's
time
done.
he's done.
No, he's done.
Does it matter in your eyes if they're caught once, if they're caught twice, if they're caught 3 times? Does that matter?
I mean, if they're caught once, you're just like, oh, here's another guy. But Cano, who's a heck of a hitter, and I look at him as a Yankee, for great years in New York. 2 times, I just think you're foolish. What are you trying to prove? Like, I mean, is it enough getting caught the first time? I mean, I get it again. If people are doing it all around you, I guess it's a harder temptation, but we were always taught, especially watching sports. I mean, I know football players, that's the other thing. Football players can get away with this stuff a little easier, I guess. They do testing, but whenever they're doing it, because you hear about it too. But no, I don't, to me, when you can know, he should be done. He should be totally done. And I guess if they want to see like how the voters will vote for him, but you just said it, there's guys that they're not even giving a chance to. I would feel like he'd be one of them.
Now, so Phil, we talked about, and now you don't have to dive into that topic, but we talked about in our previous show whether or not Pete Rose should go in. Do you liken this situation, the PED situation, to something like Pete Rose or the Houston Astros organization, who was also caught cheating? It's all cheating, but do you see it in a different light from each other? Or
I always had a harder time with Pete Rose trying to get in because, see, with steroids with players, it's kind of on an even playing field for the most part. Because I would say over 60% were using stuff like that. But for a manager to be like directly outcoming games, to make a profit on it, it's tougher to see him come in, especially since he hasn't been like apologetic towards it. He hasn't been like really remorseful towards it. He's kind of always maintained he hasn't done anything wrong when obviously he has. So I mean, and then with the Astros, it's it's kind of the same thing. I mean, they're just using technology and other stuff to get an edge instead of like drugs. So yeah.
Now, well, if we look at 2 pitchers who are in the Hall of Fame here, first is Gaylord Perry. He wrote in his autobiography before he was elected into the Hall of Fame, I'd always have it being grease in at least 2 places. In case the umpires would ask me to wipe one off, I'd never want to be caught out there with anything, though. It just wouldn't be professional. Whitey Ford said in 1963 World Series against the Dodgers, quote, I used enough mud to build a dam. Obviously, those 2 admitted to cheating, but they are in the Hall of Fame. Other guys admitted to using steroids, PEDs. They, so far, none of them are in the Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, during that, at the time for those guys, it wasn't like, I think it's kind of what we're seeing now. with the spider tack, like
All
the
right.
illegal substances and stuff like that. So, but
The time. At the
time,
time,
see?
everyone is using
See?
steroids, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And, like what, like mud or, whatever they're using wasn't illegal by the game. That's another thing. Like, baseball didn't have rules against this. So, like, that's another, like they're well within their rights, So, yeah, it's always at that time thing. So, Joe, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
And that's interesting hearing about those two pitchers, right? Because now we're at the point where we're going to start accusing Derek, like you said, about all these guys. Like, what are we going to do? We're going to have a witch hunt, like you said. That's a perfect example. Like, is Jacob deGrom doing something? I mean, the guy's really talented. I hope not. But there is cases that you're going to think about this, and like, but Whitey Ford and Gaylord Perry, two of the best pitchers of all time, are sitting there saying they're doing things to the baseball and gaining an advantage, but they did it in world, and guys that probably Don Larson, probably in the World Series, stuff like this. I mean, I don't know. Sports has always been something of a, trying to think of the right word. Like, you'd hope there would be nothing going on, but it's just not the way it is. And there's things that have happened throughout the history of baseball, like Phil said, that it's so true. Like, will it ever stop? Probably not. It's just this era has become a lot more polarizing than I think we even thought it could be.
Did you want to say something, Phil?
No, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really tough to say. And then you dive in because people say there are horrible people in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Ty Cobb was probably one of the worst people on planet Earth, and assaulted people, and he's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
there's rumors
there's
that Roger Hornsby was potentially in the KKK.
Plus, it's tough. It's also, when you get into like the older guys, it's like, they were playing, the game was segregated. So you're not even playing against the best then too. So it's just like kind of, and then, so it's just like, it's tough to really judge anything. I mean, but like you were saying, like there's, when you bring up like, I don't know, there's awful people in the Hall of Fame. So it's just like, it's tough to, stuff like that.
Well, Phil, you can go on the soapbox here. Take as long as you want. We'll let you sit back and go ahead. Let us know, what are your ultimate thoughts? Who belongs in? Who maybe doesn't belong in? Is it all the same? Should it be separated case by case? Take it wherever you want to take it here.
I think I've kind of made it. I think I kind of made my overall thoughts kind of well known in over the course of this episode. I think, case by case basis, it's tough to do that. I just think, just take the player, just put the player on the ballot, and obviously, but just honestly, I think they should all be.
We want your opinion.
Who are you putting honestly, in? I think they should. Who am I putting in? I'm putting all the guys that excelled. I think, you got, Bonds. I mean, Bonds was one of the best players of all time. I mean, steroids or not, he was one of the best players of all time. Roger Clemens, one of the best pitchers of all time. When it gets tricky is like where it's just the home run hitters, like Mark McGwire. He didn't do anything else but hit home runs. Sammy Sosa, same thing. Right. Jason Giambi, he didn't do anything but hit home runs. But then again, like, you got like Andy Pettit, like he said he only used it once, for an injury to come back from, and he's still one of the greatest postseason pitchers. I think you just gotta take into account their career, and if someone either it was linked to it, or they just should be in just maybe like an asterisk or something, just to, just to tell their own, just to let, like I was saying earlier, just to tell the story of, you can't just like forget about these players. You gotta let them in. So I think, especially like the better players from that era deserve to be there. So,
can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Joe.
Phil, so you're saying that the guys, and I respect your point, the guys that basically, whether they were caught or not, you want an asterisk though, right? You said if they were,
well, they shouldn't be excluded. They shouldn't be excluded.
Right.
It should be, yeah.
But no, your point's very valid. It's very respectable, and it's gonna be interesting going forward to see if Bonds even gets close with the boats he's at and these other guys. But yeah, Jared, go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in.
Oh no, that's all right. So very, very interesting thoughts, Phil. We very much appreciate you coming on, and we're gonna jump to a new person now. But as always, thank you for coming on, and we'll have you on. Don't worry, in the future, I'm sure.
Sure.
Phil, stay well, my friend.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks again for having me on.
So now we'd have Mike Azzalina joining us. We just had Phil Engel on, and now Mike Azzalina will be joining us once again to give us his opinion on PEDs and the steroid era. Mike, once again, thank you for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
And let's jump right into it, Mike. So should the steroid era players, how should they be tackled when it comes to the Hall of Fame? Do you want to just give us your generic feelings before we get started, and we can kind of figure out where to take the conversation from there?
Yeah, of course. This is one of the most interesting sports topics I think that is out there. I think if you're sitting at any bar in America and this topic comes up, you could find 8 different opinions going down the bar row. Like there are so many different schools of thought when it comes to this, and mine's pretty simple. I think you look at the player in terms of that era that they played in, right? And you think about their career over the long haul. And what it looked like in comparison to, the before, the after, if you can identify those areas in their career. So just give you an example of what I'm trying to say. When I look at Barry Bonds, before he blew up like a giant balloon like Mr. Met in San Francisco, he would have been in the Hall of Fame with his stats in Pittsburgh. When I think about somebody like McGwire, I don't know that his numbers would have carried over. I also think that he had steroids as a part of his career for a very long time too. So for me, it really depends on the player, and it depends on the timeline that they played in. But I'm all for them getting into the Hall if they used. I have no issue if their stats prevail over the course of time. I think they belong in.
So would you say, does it matter those that were actually found guilty as opposed, it doesn't sound like it, found guilty as opposed to those who were accused? Obviously, people like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, it's never been confirmed that they used it, though widely speculated. And you mentioned people like Mark McGwire and Palmeiro and Alex Rodriguez all officially tested positive. Does it matter those that are found guilty versus just the ones that are accused?
I mean, it's funny because look, a guy like A-Rod tested positive. Absolutely. But then you look at a guy like Pudge Rodriguez, who clearly was huge at a point in his career. And then all of a sudden, when testing was instituted, he lost 30 pounds out of nowhere. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Pudge Rodriguez used steroids. There's no doubt in my mind that Jeff Bagwell used steroids. And they're in the Hall of Fame. Like to me, if they can be in, we knew they were using, then somebody who tested positive should be in as well.
Now I remember Phil talked about how if Bud Selig is in the Hall of Fame, and he officially kind of screwed up the whole steroid era. what are our feelings? Joe, you can jump in on this too. What are our feelings? He completely failed in terms of combating the steroid era, but he's into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, for me, I'll never forget Bud Selig because of the All-Star game that year. I'll never forget that. Like, I can't believe that we ended a tie. Like, it just shouldn't happen in Milwaukee. I still remember it to this day. Yeah, but no, other than that, I think that Bud Selig was just a terrible GM, president or whatever you want to call him, the Manfred commissioner that, yeah. But I never could forgive him for that one. And I think, like, as far as the steroid era, I guess it was a hard, like what Mike's saying about the guys that are, well, he mentioned Pudge and Jeff Bagwell, but there's other guys in the Hall of Fame that have done wrong things. We talked about Ty Cobb earlier. There's other players that have done things on the field or off the field that are in. So is it because this is a question I had earlier to myself. Is this a question of, like, the era being the steroid era, or is it just that the whole vacuum of what's right and what's wrong, and how do we, and who's the police, and the judge and jury? So Bud Selig, no, not one of my favorite people.
Look, I'm going to jump in there because Joseph, I know where you stand on this, and the moral ground that you have with the cheating piece, and it makes you better at baseball, the whole 9 yard. Like, I get it. And if you look for the rule of elections, the fifth rule in the rule of elections is about the voting, and there's this whole piece about how voting shall be based upon the player's record, playing ability, integrity, sportsmanship, character, and contributions to the teams on which the player played. Okay, highlight a couple of words here for you. Integrity, sportsmanship, character. All right? Now, Joseph, you mentioned it. There are players in the Hall that did some bad things. Gaylord Perry doctored balls. We're now dealing with that in a whole nother world right now. Juan Marichal literally tried to kill a pitcher with a bat in the middle of a game. Like, tried to get sportsmanship? Like, what? Tim Raines used cocaine during games, admitted to having a vial in his back pocket during games, right? Like, I heard Darryl Strawberry talk a few years ago about snorting in between innings. Hall of Famers from the 60s and 70s use greenies. Those guys, those are amphetamines that are now illegal in today's game. There are a ton of drunks in the Hall of Fame. Like, Bobby Cox committed domestic abuse in 1995. He's in the Hall of Fame. Trish Speaker was a member of the KKK and is in the Hall of Fame. Guys, like, are we really going to draw the moral line at cheating when we talk? This is not the Hall of Good Guys. It's not the Hall of Good Guys. Ozzie Smith said it best a few years ago. They asked him about this, and he said, we all have a dark side. Like, the real piece to this is that the best among us, no matter what we do in our lives, what job we have, the best among us are also the worst. Like, we all have a dark side, and cheating, to me, like, if that's where they're going to draw the moral line, then this Hall it's a disaster. Like, then you got to pull everybody out.
No, and that's a fair point. But unfortunately, it seems like the world that we are in today, the path that we're going down, things are scrutinized a lot more. We mentioned a couple of those names with Phil just earlier in this episode. Ty Cobb, who assaulted fans in stands, and his wife, and but now you almost think of the question of the integrity, and people are going to think, do we continue breaking that integrity and allowing those players in who cheated, or do we stop it? Yeah, we made mistakes. We put in people who probably shouldn't have been put in, but moving forward, we don't do that.
And I think that's a fair question. I mean, like when you think about it in that regard, yeah. I mean, where do we start that? Where's the line stop and the next one start is fair. But I feel like if we're going to start playing judge and jury, and the writers are going to be the deciders of, what's moral and what's not moral, I just have an issue with like another human being could be very moral themselves. And we just don't know about it because they're not in the public eye as much as some of these athletes are. To me, when I think about the cheating piece that we're talking about specifically that you're mentioning here, Derek, like in the time where these guys were cheating, like Ken Kim and Eddie came out after he retired and he admitted to using steroids and said, look, like more than 50% of our league is using steroids. Like that's just the truth of it. So like if I'm sitting in one dugout and there's 13 other guys in the other dugout who are cheating, right? Like are the 26 guys in my dugout, if 13 of them do it, are we cheating or are we evening the score a little bit here? Like, I that's where I'm kind of hesitant because, one of Joseph's favorite players, Darren Dalton, obviously juiced back in the early 90s. Like he juiced. There's no doubt that 93 team had a bunch of guys who were juicing. It doesn't, and Joseph, I know I'm going to turn it to you because I know you disagree with this, but like, it doesn't automatically make you a great baseball player because you're taking steroids. Like you still got to be able to hit a 95-mile-an-hour ball moving every which way at you, and be able to hit it on a sweet spot of a bat that's about this thick, while having the hand-eye coordination to do so. So like Darren Dalton's not in the Hall, and he was using like. So to me, yeah, it enhanced certain players' abilities, but not every player is a Hall of Famer because of it. I think it just evened the score a little bit. Joseph, I know you disagree, so I'll let you kind of come back at me with that.
Mike, yeah, and you also said this too earlier. I thought it was interesting, Derek, that I think it was Ken Rosenthal and Jason Stark, right? They're the two guys you talked about.
And Peter Gammons.
And
yeah.
Peter, so three prominent writers have voted in every year Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds to be Hall of Famers. That's kind of earth-shattering to me, is that three very good writers. I mean, guys we all read. Mike's got Stark's autograph. I've always looked up to Gammons, and I love Rosenthal. Like, there you go. Like, that is a very small sample, but it's interesting to hear those guys, vote in or want to vote in those players. I thought that was interesting. The point that Mike is trying to make is correct. I don't agree all the way through with that. Yes, I know steroids doesn't make you a great hitter, but what steroids does is somewhat, I think, make you stronger. I'm not saying it is anything to do with, I know that was a little obvious, but I'm trying to think of my exact point here. So like I played ball until I was in high school. I know I wouldn't be a major league player even with steroids. And then people that are there now, even average players, right? They're probably not going to be great to be with steroids either. But guys like we're talking about, like the Bondses, McGuire's, Sosa's, those guys did get an advantage. Now, if other guys were using at 50, 60%, then I guess my opinion would change a little bit, but I just don't. I don't know.
Let me ask you this, like, and Derek, I open this up to you too. Like, is Barry Bonds a Hall of Famer before the steroids?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, he starts taking them because he's jealous of McGuire and Sosa and all the attention that's happening. That's the story that has been told all over, over and over again, that McGuire and Sosa went on that home run tear, and Bonds was jealous because he was no longer that perennial NL MVP that he had been 3 times before he started juicing. So he starts taking because he wants to have that, lore over him again. Look, I hate Barry Bonds. You can't stand the guy. But like, as a competitor, like, I kind of like he wants to be up there with them. Like he was once the guy, And then these dudes start taking, and they have a step out in front of him. So he tries to even up with them again, and he starts taking. Then he hits 72 bombs or whatever it was. So like that's kind of my like that's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah, I get it. He was cheating the game, but so were hundreds of other dudes in the league at the same time.
And guys that were injured a lot. You did mention Dalton for one. I'll say this, guys like Chase Utley, who's always hurt with his knees. He could have been taking something like, I don't want to speculate, but just saying guys that were often injured, they could have definitely take stuff to get back like quick.
And I've said multiple times here, I truly think I would vote for Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. I would put them both in strictly because they were Hall of Famers probably before, never confirmed any that's the big thing, innocent till proven guilty. It's never been proven. And I think it's blatantly obvious, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Mike, with and I will say, for those that don't understand how difficult it is to hit a baseball, it's one of the most difficult things in the world of sports. I continue to give probably the most props to NHL players. I think that's the most difficult in terms of skating and then playing the game as well. But anyway, the guys with small numbers here, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Palmeiro, Canseco, those guys were strictly one facet. They were home run hitters. That was pretty much it. So those guys never really got high numbers. When you look at someone like Manny Ramirez,
I'm a soft yes on both.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Derek.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm a soft yes on voting in guys like Sosa and Palmeiro. Like, I don't know. To me, when you look at Sosa and you look at that 5-year span for Sammy Sosa from like 98 to 2002, I believe it was, he had almost 300 home runs. I believe it was like 290 somewhere in there. Home runs in that 5-year span where he like hit 60 a bunch of times. On either side of those 5 years though, like he was pretty good. Like he wasn't terrible. He had like a 50-some WAR, like, over the course of time. Like, so I'm a soft no, yes, kind of in the middle on Sosa. Like I don't know. He was a good but not great player, but I feel like there are some of those out there too, especially now.
He doubled a lot.
And Palmeiro too. Like Palmeiro, he's a 3,000 hit, player. Like 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. He's ranked in the top 10 in the history of first baseman in WAR. So like, there's some stuff there. I mean, the 500 home runs, I'm sure with the steroids that probably gets cut in half at least, but I don't know about the 3,000 hits. Those might still be there. So he's closer to yes for me than Sosa is, but not completely out of the question.
I truly look at it in a case-by-case basis, right. I guess then. Bonds and Clemens, yes. I don't want the guys who admitted to, I don't know if this is completely true, but admitted to it after they played, most of those guys I don't want in. I don't want Palmeiro. I don't want McGwire or Sosa. People like Gary Sheffield, I guess that comes into play. Was Gary Sheffield the Hall of Famer? I think that's why he's at. So he's at 40.6% right now. It'll be his 8th year in 2022. He unknowingly used steroids, I guess, in order to heal better. That kind of stuff, all right, doesn't really bother me. But do we truly know that he ever did? Do we truly know that how often any of these guys did it? We don't really know. Right. David Ortiz is going to be an interesting one. He's on the ballot in 2022. He tested positive way back in 2003. Let me ask Mike, both David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez, it's their first years on the ballots in 2022. What are your specific thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I think I'm a yes on Ortiz. I do believe like his numbers are just insane. Like
Yeah.
he played, I'd have to look, but I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that he played 75% of his career at like post steroid era, like when the punishments and testing kind of came into play. You know, I think he was probably drug tested more than most players in baseball.
Yeah.
You know, during his time. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but like I feel like he was probably tested a lot more than most. So I'm gonna go with a pretty solid yes for him. A-Rod's so hard for me, dude. A-Rod's such a difficult one for me. Gosh, Joseph, what do you think about Ortiz? Let me think on A-Rod for another minute.
Well, it's interesting about Ortiz because I don't really. This is so hard. I don't categorize him with Bonds and that group, right? Palmeiro.
Yeah, because like I said, he played most of his career after
He's
that.
also a likable guy. Like, and to me, and I'm not trying. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but people will. You know, who knows? With these
Well, there,
local
that goes
authorities are.
back to does the character count? I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess with me, it does a little bit. You know what? I think I would say yes to Ortiz. I think the way he handled himself, he hit the ball, he hit a lot of home runs. Listen, he was a part of that big run Boston had. You know, he was right in the middle of it all with Manny. But I'll tell you right now,
Manny
I don't care who Right.
And
I don't.
His numbers are a
I'm
lot
gonna say this
lower
right now, and I apologize to my friends and family that are Yankee fans, but absolutely not on A-Rod. Absolutely not on A-Rod.
So I guess my only hesitation with A-Rod is like I feel like A-Rod, to me, like has already gotten a ton of consequences for what happened. Like you know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I sit with A-Rod.
He just made me mad. He just made me mad during his career. He just was.
Well, he made you mad because he killed the Phillies in that.
When he came to be a Yankee, he tried to take Derek Jeter's spotlight. Like, what are you trying to do, dude?
Oh gosh. Well, then they don't sign him if you don't want him to take Jeter's spotlight. I don't know. I think for me, Derek, if I'm going to land anywhere with A-Rod, maybe they delay him like they've done with Bonds and Clemens and make him wait, you know, almost the full decade. But I don't see how you have a Hall of Fame without Alex Rodriguez. I struggle so much with it. To me it's a yes. I feel like he was already given the punishments within, you know, the testing and the seasons and the suspensions and the fines and everything.
But if he gets in, then Bonds has to get in.
Well, I want Bonds in.
I know.
I want Bonds in.
Shout out to Big Tom. Big Tom doesn't want Bonds in.
I'll talk to him next.
When we think about, though, in terms of A-Rod, when we talk about, was he a Hall of Famer before? I don't think he had enough years, because I guess we would probably say somewhere in Texas is probably where he started. So if you look at his years in Seattle, 7 years in Seattle, 189 home runs, wasn't really a home run hitter, 133 stolen bases, 309 average, 100, almost 200 doubles, almost 600 RBIs. He had a second MVP finish, a ninth MVP finish, a third MVP finish. If you can think of, that's really difficult, right? Like to imagine him just playing for Seattle for 20 years or whatever it was. I think he would have been a Hall of Famer. But his best years were obviously when he was a Texas Ranger and a Yankee. I'm putting him in. I'm
looking at his numbers right now as you're talking, Derek, and I think Texas is probably that boundary line like you talked about.
Yeah,
probably where
that's where you see the significant spike in those home runs.
Yeah, there's a huge
so
spike.
He could have been using in Texas. That's a very good possibility. Right?
But I mean, even his time in Seattle, like the last few years in Seattle, he eclipsed 40 home runs 3 times. Like,
playing with Griffey couldn't have hurt. They had some great teams, Tino and Edgar. I mean, think about the guys they were around.
Yeah, I got to go with him in. I do. I feel like he's already gotten. He was tested positive. He had the punishments for it. If Bonds gets in, I think A-Rod probably finds his way in probably 8, 9, 10 years down the line.
I wouldn't hate it. I just don't like him.
So
Being
let me
honest,
ask
it's
you
an
I
real
hate
quick.
Bonds. I can't stand Bonds, but I think he's in.
Oh, that means we have to talk about that quick. Michael, please tell Derek and the audience what you did in college with the Barry Bonds situation. This is classic.
So when Barry Bonds was on his home run tour and like ESPN was following him for the Bonds on Bonds show, a group of my friends and I went down to one of the games that the Giants were in town, and my buddy and I made 2 T-shirts. One said Bonds with the Pirates on the back. It said before steroids. On the other side, it said Bonds with the Giants. Said after steroids. My buddy dressed in a sumo suit, blow up sumo suit. And I walked just like I am, all 5'7", 100 pounds of me, walked around the stadium yelling stuff. Got down out behind the dugout yelling at the Giants crew. Bonds were yelling at him. I mean, we were probably interviewed by every newspaper all across, the United States that night.
They got it. Yeah, you guys got the papers
San
and stuff.
Francisco Chronicle. We were in ESPN magazine. We were in Sports Illustrated.
Kevin Franzen gave you a shout out on Twitter.
Kevin Franzen says that's the reason he fell in love with Philadelphia fans. Was the two of us.
That's
like
so cool.
I mean, it was. We didn't expect that. Like we thought a few fans might want to take a picture with us, but by the 4th inning, Marshall Harris is sitting next to me in the crowd interviewing me for ABC. So like just a total. But I can't stand the guy. But I'd be a terrible baseball fan if I didn't think that dude belonged in the Hall. He's one of the greatest baseball players to ever live. Steroids are not, like, one of the greatest to ever play.
Very true. Very true.
Well, Mike, before you go, let me get your opinion on this. And we talked about it with Phil already. There's many forms of cheating, right? Do we see the PED using as being different from cheaters like Pete Rose, cheaters like the Houston Astros, who, by the way, I mean, that will probably be on another show at some point. Do we see it as being different? Should we be less lenient? Because obviously the Houston Astros got pretty much nothing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, guys, like, cheating to me is defined in the same way when I think about it when it comes to sports. And it's about gaining a competitive advantage one way or another. Like, when I think about baseball, steroids is a way of cheating. Like it is. But it wasn't like 1 or 2 players were doing it is the point that I land on with that. What the Astros did was obviously gaining a competitive advantage, stealing signs, and they were one of like 2 teams. So the consequence didn't fit the crime in that sense. There's all sorts of cheating that happens on every play in football. There's holding, there's using, face mask. That's why they have the penalties within the game, right? Like gaining a competitive advantage in a basketball game, the fouls or the fake ones that Trae Young tends to use every night. That's gaining a competitive advantage. So to me, like, I don't find it to be different. I think it's different in the way that you do it, but it's all the same in the sense that you're just trying to gain competitive advantage over the person on the other side of the field. So at the end of the day, it's all one and the same. It's just in how you do it, I guess.
Very interesting. Well, Mike, we appreciate your thoughts on the subject, and we very much are interested in what you guys have to say. Jump down to the comments and let us know your thoughts. Should it be a case-by-case basis? Should it be everyone out, everyone in? As Mike said, there's probably, you could go into a bar right now, you get 8 different opinions on what should be done about players in the Hall of Fame era or in the steroid era in the Hall of Fame. But Mike, we appreciate you coming on and letting us know your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing what people have to say. I know that, I know that my opinion is not a popular one with the purists. Like I totally understand and I get it, but I'll be curious to know what their reasons are, outside of it's cheating, right? Like I'll be curious to know what that looks like. So thanks for having me on. It's a great conversation. It's one I always loved. I love to have for sure. So always a blast, my friends. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mike. So we appreciate Mike and Phil Engel coming on. Very intriguing opinions from both of them. But Joe, lots of opinions out there. So we hope that everyone jumps down in the comments and lets us know their opinions. But I'm pretty sure we got your opinion already. But do you want to just give us a overall sum of your thoughts about the guys in the steroid era?
Well, listening to brother Mike there, I have to say there is some gray areas. I mean, we just talked about David Ortiz and even A-Rod and Palmeiro is a little more open shut for me. I don't think he belongs. Those other two, they might. I guess I'll agree to agree. Actually, I'm not going to agree to disagree. I do not think that in my own head that Bonds, Clemens, and even Sosa, McGuire, those four, and maybe even Andy Pettit. But again, we're talking about eras here. We're talking about the whole thing was a steroid era, and that is what I think is the biggest question right now. And I don't, maybe in the end, Derek, I'm going to want one of these guys to get in, because then Pete Rose's conversation gets a little louder. I don't want to ever forget that, and I think we shouldn't. But if you cheated in some way, even if it was 50 or 60%, it's almost like your cousin Johnny was saying the other day to us, when you cheat in school, you get caught, you're going to be in trouble. So therefore, you get caught on a baseball field or in your sport, I think there should be ramifications for that. And to me, I don't really want to see them all in, but if they do get in, it'll be interesting to see which ones get in and which ones don't. But that's my thoughts.
It gets touchy. And I probably should have brought this up with the guys that were just on, but I just kind of thought about it. But
it happens.
Like if you let even one of these guys in, does that create a domino effect and tell people that cheaters can get into the ultimate prize of the Hall of Fame?
What does that tell? Exactly. That's a good point. What is it telling younger players, right? What's it telling future draft picks? What's it telling minor leaguers? What's it telling young rookies? Like,
or just young little league kids coming up.
Well,
they're obviously not going to be using PEDs.
We hope not.
You know the gist. The cheating part.
Right. Exactly. Right. No, I know what you're saying. I think too, like, you got to think about it as like youth sports is huge around the United States. You don't ever want to hear like a coach maybe hit a player in a spot where he wasn't supposed to hit again, or you had a kid hit more times than another kid, or that sort of thing. And then you think about these guys, and it's like, it's almost like they felt the pressure so much that they just wanted to get that advantage. They want to get that edge. Like Mike said about Bonds. I thought there was a great point about the Bonds, McGuire, Sosa race. But then again, does it make it right? And when I come back around, I say no, it doesn't. And the argument, like we all said, it could keep going around and around. I'm sure we can have another show about in another form, but right now that's how I kind of stand in my adult life here, just thinking about it as where I'm at.
It's pretty crazy because there are so many opinions that can be had on this. Mike said it perfectly. If you went up to a bunch of people, they would all say, no, but don't put any of them in. Put all of them in. Put them in. Put an asterisk.
Phil said that too, right?
Yes. Case by case basis. Let some of them in, but don't let others in. There's just so many ways you can go about it, and I don't think we're ultimately gonna have. There's no peanut butter spread correct answer that you could say this is how it should be for every one of them, and unfortunately, it's gonna be on those writers next year, because that is the final year that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are going to be on the ballot, and they are probably two of the best options from that steroid era in terms of, if you go towards were they a Hall of Famer beforehand? I'm sure, but they both
numbers.
were.
I agree.
So if they don't get in,
That's going to be
I think
something.
it could be. But then I also think about, we mentioned David Ortiz and A-Rod, so I wonder how far or how much they get. I don't think either one gets in on the first ballot. Should they? I don't know if David Ortiz should get in on the first ballot. I don't know
I'm
if
talking about Gino
A-Rod
and
either.
Mariano getting in.
Right.
Yeah, those guys got in the first ballot. That they're phenomenal. But A-Rod and Ortiz,
hey,
third, fourth, fifth, maybe.
One of the
Yeah.
most interesting topics in the world of sports, not just baseball, the world of sports. So I'm glad we got to tackle it.
Yeah.
Joe, as always, if you want to give us, I mean, you kind of did wrap it up, but if you want to give us your final thoughts on the subject.
No, it's just yeah, like you said, it's and I love how you use the word tackled. I think that's you think about football when you hear that, but I when I heard tackled, I'm literally thinking about a baseball player, maybe in like a brawl type of thing, getting tackled. But you know, you were very it was poignant too to hear you say, you know, well, how do we come to these conclusions, and how Mike said about the moral ground. And I think in the end, these writers have a lot of power, Derek. We know that. And they're going to continue having that power. And it's going to depend. Like Kurt Schilling's the other one we didn't talk about. Yeah, he wasn't really accused of PEDs, but that guy doesn't shut his mouth. And then all of a sudden they're talking about him because he's politically incorrect or, you know, stuff he says. So it never will end. I'm glad we have this forum that we can go on and talk about it. And I really do hope the listeners and we get the comments and just keep on following us, keep on, you know, liking our stuff, subscribing on YouTube, please. But other than that, I think this was an awesome topic, and I think we'll find more topics like this. And you know, we'll have a day off tomorrow because we did our show today, but we'll be coming back on Monday, so I'll be excited for that.
And I think it's safe to say there's no right or wrong answer to this topic. Everyone is going to have their own opinion, and everyone's opinion is valid. That's why it's not like you can't say that you're wrong. I always go back to like movies or food. If I say I love a movie and you say you hated it, I can't say, Joe, what? You're stupid. You're wrong. If you didn't like it, you didn't like it.
Right.
If people think that they belong in and some don't, that's cheating. You can't really debate. This wasn't really much of a debate, but you can't really debate them and say that they're wrong because they're true opinion. But
true.
Very interesting topic, and we hope everyone enjoyed. Yes, jump down to the comments. Let us know your thoughts. Do what should be done about the PED era and the steroid era, and do they belong in the Hall of Fame? Please let us know your thoughts. Don't forget, as Joe mentioned, subscribe on YouTube. Give us a like. Give us a click for a subscribe. We very much appreciate it. It's going to help us build our channel, and that's what we're hoping for. And we hope everyone enjoys everything. If you just want to listen, all podcast platforms. Go out there and follow us on Facebook group, and on Twitter. Everywhere is Time Out with Derek and Joe. You'll find us. And don't forget to email us if there's any topics that you want us to cover, similar to these that we, as well as the Pete Rose episode that we tackled. Send us an email and let us know a topic that you want us to tackle, and we'll be happy to do so. As always, everyone, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Stay safe. Take care.